Now, one of the pieces of advice I always give on this channel is that when you relocate to a new country or to a new environment, you must make it your mission to assimilate into that new environment. You must make it your mission to develop a sense of belonging and identity that conforms to that new environment. Because unless you do that, life will be very difficult for you. Because here's the thing, us as immigrants, whether we care to admit it or not, us as immigrants, when we relocate from our countries of origin, what we want or what we desire is to be accepted. We want to be accepted in that society. What that means is we want people of that host country to see us in a certain kind of light. We want to be perceived a certain way. How we talk, how we behave, how we conduct ourselves. And mostly we want people to see us in a positive light. So basically, we do whatever it takes to conform, to get in line. Now, there's a man called Charles Cooley. He's a sociologist and he captured this so well. And this is what he says. He says that us as individuals, we develop our sense of self by observing how other people perceive us. Everything that we do, we are constantly looking out at other people and how they judge us, how they see us, when they look at us, when they listen to us. We are constantly looking out for that. And this is what he called the looking glass theory. So basically what he's saying is that perception is reality. Our behavior, our self-confidence, our self-esteem is determined or is detected by how we predict how other people are going to perceive us. Now then, as I was saying, or as I said in the beginning, us as immigrants, when we relocate, we want to assimilate into a new environment. However, that is not to suggest that we should shed our original identity completely. It's not suggesting that we should lose our roots or we should forget our roots or our original identity, meaning that we forget our culture, customs, traditions, how we were raised, how we were socialized originally. It does not mean that we completely forget our background, our roots. That's basically what I'm saying. So what then that means is that for someone like me, who is British and Zimbabwean at the same time, what that means is that I want to maintain both identities. And this is where the challenge comes in. How do you maintain both identities? In our attempt to hold on to both identities, to hold on to being British and being Zimbabwean or Nigerian, Ghanaian, Kenyan, and so forth, in our attempt to hold on to both, we face obstacles and we struggle to honor both cultures, both identities. Now, I'm going to give you some of these challenges or why it is hard to maintain both identities, or why it is hard for us to feel connected to our original roots. For some people, it is hard to keep that connection. And of course, at the end of this video, I'm going to come up with solutions as to how we can keep that connection. Because personally, I think it is important for us to maintain or to preserve our roots in as much as we are adapting. And we must absolutely do that because, as I already stated, it is that important. But at the same time, we should preserve our roots and identity, our original identity. So this is what I want us to explore in this video. And as always, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section. I'm always interested to hear what you think about everything I share on this channel. Now then, the first reason why it is difficult to maintain or to preserve our roots in a foreign country is to do with a clash of cultures. Now, this is more common for someone who is born here or for someone who is born abroad. For instance, I'll give an example of my daughter. So she was born here and she's growing up here. She's going to school here and she's being exposed to how things are done in this country. She is more likely to identify herself as being British more than she's likely to identify herself as being Zimbabwean. Now, I'm going to explain further as to why that could be. One of the reasons is lack of exposure to Zimbabwean culture. Of course, she's born here, she's growing up here. She's going to have more exposure of the British culture, how things are done in this country, the customs, the traditions, and so forth. So because of that, she's more likely to identify more with the British culture. She's more likely to appreciate the British culture more than she's likely to appreciate the Zimbabwean culture. And there are several reasons for that. And I'm not saying that everyone is like this. Now, the perfect scenario would be for my child to have equal appreciation of both cultures. That would be like the perfect scenario. But I'm talking about a scenario where that child identifies more as being British than she identifies as being Zimbabwean. Because if that child spends less time in Zimbabwe, you know, she only goes maybe once in 2 years, once in 10 years, or once a year, that child spends less time in Zimbabwe, obviously, then that child is more likely to identify themselves as British because of that lack of exposure we talked about. And also because that child spends less time in Zimbabwe, there isn't enough time spent for that child to understand the Zimbabwean culture the way she understands the British culture. There isn't enough time for that child to develop a deep appreciation of the Zimbabwean culture the same way she appreciates the British culture. And if we look at schooling, now the school plays a crucial role in the molding of the child. Yes, the family plays a role, and I'm going to come to that in a minute. But for now, let's look at the school. As I said, the school plays a crucial role in the exposure. The things that the child consumes, for example, the books that the child reads, the games that the child plays, the company that the child keeps, the choices that child is likely to make in their life as they are growing up. The school plays a crucial role in those choices. And actually, studies have been conducted, like surveys have been done, and actually prove that children of immigrants struggle when it comes to identity. There's this kind of identity crisis that they develop because they don't really know or fully understand or grasp the concept of being dual or having that dual nationality. They don't really know exactly where they belong because they find themselves in the middle. So exposure plays a crucial role in where someone aligns themselves when it comes to their cultural compass. And as I said, school is an important part of that equation. Now, I have to mention quite quickly that exposure also applies to adults. Even if you were born and grew up in Zimbabwe and you relocated to another country, you came to the UK, Australia, Canada, and you've been living there for years, and you haven't really taken the time to go back to Zimbabwe, or maybe you cannot go to Zimbabwe because of circumstances. I know of people who waited for years for their visa situation to be sorted out, years and years. Some people are not even able to go back to bury their relatives. It happened to me. I lost someone very dear to me and I couldn't go to bury them. So you can imagine such situations, because these are real situations in our society. So you can imagine such a situation where someone is not able to go home at all, or as many times as they would want. In that situation, it becomes difficult to develop that sense of connection. Sometimes you feel detached from your roots, because the longer you stay in your new environment or in your new country without visiting home or without going back home, the more disconnected you feel, because there are a lot of changes that happen whilst you're away. And the longer you stay without reconnecting with your roots, without going back to see those changes or to experience those changes for yourself, the more difficult it is for you to feel that sense of connection. You feel this sense of detachment. You feel alienated from your own country. And the longer that goes on, the more chances or the more likelihood that you will develop an identity crisis. And also there is a danger that over time, if you don't go back to reconnect with your roots, you will actually lose pride for your culture. You will lose pride for your original roots, because you have gone so long without establishing that reconnection. And that is a sad situation when that happens. It is sad because I think us as immigrants, it is important to maintain our roots. Personally, that is my opinion. I think it is important for us to maintain our roots and to preserve our identity. Now, remember earlier I gave you an example of a child who was born here, who is growing up here, who is attending school here, and so forth. Now, this is where parenting comes in, because sometimes that child doesn't identify with being Zimbabwean or Nigerian, Kenyan, and so forth, not because of lack of exposure or little exposure to Zimbabwe, or not because that child doesn't go to Zimbabwe as often. Sometimes that is not the reason why the child feels detached from Africa. Sometimes it is because of how that child is being raised, how the child is being brought up, the values that are being instilled in that child from an early age. Yes, school plays an important role. School plays a crucial role in a child's development. But if you study your psychology as well, you will discover that the first 9 years of a child's development are the most crucial. The first 9 years are the years that determine the character of the child and the behavior of the child and so forth. Now, this varies depending on which book you read, but when I did my course on infant development, that is what I got from that. The first 9 years are the most crucial years when that child's character is shaped, is developed, and so forth. So as parents, this is where our influence comes into play. It is important for us to instill those values in our children from an early age. And this is, well, I might as well start with the solutions now because we are here now. So as parents, when we are raising our kids, one of the things that I would suggest as a parent as well, one of the things that helps in helping my child or even myself as well, one of the things that helps in maintaining our roots or preserving our identity is through language. Now, we know that kids will go to school and at school they speak English. That is what they will speak because that is the common language. So as parents, when we are at home, what language do we speak? How do we communicate with our children? Do we communicate in our language? In my case, when I'm at home, do I converse with my child in my mother tongue? Do I teach my child how to speak Shona? Do I teach my child the nuances of that language? Am I taking the time to teach my child how to speak in the mother tongue? Because this is one way that you can preserve your roots and maintain your identity. It's through language. And these days, it is so easy to achieve. It is easy for us as parents to teach our kids how to speak our mother tongue. We can buy books. I can buy Shona books. If you speak Ndebele, you can buy Ndebele books. If you speak Swahili, you can buy Swahili books for your children to read. You can teach your kids from an early age. It is so easy to achieve these days. And also these days, we even have apps and we've got videos. People make videos for children to learn those languages. So why not take advantage of those resources that are at our disposal? Because these days, it is so easy to do. So that is one solution when it comes to parenting. And of course, whenever possible as parents, let's take our kids home. Let's take our kids to Zimbabwe, to Nigeria, to Kenya, so that they can feel connected to their roots, so that they can have that exposure that I talked about. Because the more time or the more often our kids go back home, the more they will come to appreciate the culture, the traditions, the customs, and the more they solidify that language because they will be exposed to that language back home. And what better way of them to learn the mother tongue than to be at home? And I know sometimes I'm guilty of this. When I go back to Zimbabwe, sometimes I find myself speaking English. And of course, it's because that is what I'm used to over here. And unfortunately, there are some parents who actually refrain from speaking the mother tongue. They actually forbid their kids from speaking Shona or Ndebele and so forth. And this is unfortunate, but that is life. Some parents do not want their kids to speak the mother tongue for whatever reason that I don't understand. Because the way I see it, if you speak more languages, you are actually at an advantage. It means that you are richer as a person. You are at an advantage because you can easily fit in different areas of life if you speak multiple languages. That's how I see it. So that's why I say I don't understand why some parents don't want their kids to learn other languages, especially their mother tongue. Personally, I don't get it. So anyway, that is one tip. My second tip when it comes to maintaining your roots or cultural identity is just to stay connected with what is going on in the homeland, in the motherland. Just stay connected. And how you stay connected these days is very easy. These days we have social media, we've got blogs, we've got YouTube. You can easily find out exactly what is going on back home. And these days as well, you can join forums on Twitter or on X. There are spaces there. People conduct discussions. You can join those discussions and just stay connected, stay up to date. And when you participate in the events, cultural events, in the UK, we've got the Zimfest that happens every year during summertime. And during events such as the Zimfest, Zimbabweans come together and connect. They connect to their motherland through songs, through dance, through food, through all kinds of things during those kind of events. And it is a lovely thing. It reminds us of home. And we develop that sense of appreciation for our culture, for our identity, and for our roots. And we develop that sense of connection through those events. Another way you can keep your roots and preserve your identity is through reminders of home. You can keep reminders of home in your own home, in your own house. You can have things like sculptures, you can have like paintings. We have talented Zimbabwean artists who can do those paintings for us, who can do sculptures for us, beautiful sculptures that we can display in our own homes, beautiful paintings and pictures that we can display in our homes as reminders of home, something to help us stay connected to our roots. And we can also have collections of music from home. I know there are people who to this day still have those LPs, even those single records we used to play at home during Christmas. I remember when I was growing up, we had that gramophone where you would put your LP and just play those music. if you still got that, those are treasures. Honestly, I don't know where I can find some LPs. If you know where I can buy those LPs, you know, those songs from the good old days, if you know somewhere where I can actually buy those LPs, please let me know, because those are treasures. As I say, those are things that we no longer have, and if we have, we kind of take those things for granted nowadays, and we no longer readily find them. Let me put it like that. So please, if you know where I can buy those LPs, those records from the good old days, please, I would appreciate, just point me in the right direction. And also you can collect cassettes as well. I used to have lots and lots of cassettes back in the day where I would play that music that reminded me of the good old days, you know, when those nostalgic days hit you, because you will have those days. And also if you have that collection of music, maybe it's dramas, you know, those dramas that we grew up watching, Mukalota. If you have that collection, you can also play that for your children. I was surprised the other day to learn that my daughter actually knows more songs from Zimbabwe than I do. And this was a pleasant surprise. I have to be honest, I was chuffed and I was pleased that she knows songs from back home. And she was actually correcting me. She was actually teaching me, saying, oh, this song was not sung by so and so, it was sung by so and so. I mean, that is what I'm talking about. So you can have that as well as a way of preserving your roots. My last suggestion is really a continuation of what I'm saying, is through stories from back in the day. Because I remember when I was growing up, my parents, my grandparents used to sit us down and tell us those stories. You know, those folklores. Some stories were made up, of course, they were just folklores, but some stories were real stories. Stories of things that had happened a long time ago. That's how things were passed down onto us. But I think nowadays it is important for us to actually write things down, because we are scattered all over the place. It is now difficult for those stories to be passed down from generation to the next. The way we used to do in the olden days, that's how our stories were passed down. That's how our culture, customs and traditions were maintained, were preserved. It was through oral stories, and that is a beautiful part of our culture. But as I said, nowadays it is important that we actually write those stories down. Those stories, they need to be written down, because those stories were there for a reason. They were there to educate. They were there to instill character and morals into us. They were there for a very good reason. That is why it is important for us to maintain that. Yes, in as much as we should write those stories down, we should also maintain that oral storytelling. I like that. So this is something that you can practice in your own home. You can tell those Shingano to your children. It is a way of preserving your roots and identity. You can tell them true stories about your heritage, about your family bloodline, and so forth. So yeah, these are my suggestions when it comes to preserving your roots, or maintaining your roots and preserving your culture. You can do it by practicing these things I've suggested in this video. So I don't know what you think about everything that I've said in this video. Do you have any suggestions when it comes to preserving our roots or keeping our identity as immigrants living abroad? Do you have suggestions? What sort of things can we implement in order to make sure that we keep our roots and preserve our identity? What do you think? As always, feel free to share those thoughts with us in the comment section. So yeah, this is what I had for you in this video. As always, don't forget to like this video. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.